Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Lovecraft Country Season 1, Episode 7. It is called I Am. So full spoilers for the episode as always. And we also have at this show doing something different every episode.
Yeah, can I just start with just a question?
Uh-huh.
What the hell did I watch?
Well, you watched, clearly you watched, Hippolyta travel to one of those beings from Star Trek that have received transcendence into a higher being, was offered many a fantasy world, and ultimately decided who she was, and then decided to go back to Earth because she has a daughter and it'd be foolish to leave her.
Look, I was under the impression I was watching some sort of horror show, not 2001: A Space Odyssey. Because that's pretty much what I watched for half an episode.
Why not both?
What do you mean, why not both?
Why not both? It could be both. Yeah, this is definitely the most out there episode, and that says something because it's not like this is the show that's been holding back on a number of elements. I was expecting time travel, and technically there might have been some time travel there too, but certainly a portal was opened, and Lita went through it. And you know, she has the orrery, and she figures, you know, she gets the key and it points her towards this observatory. She goes there. There's a lot of stuff going on with the other characters. We'll go back and talk about that, right? What we want to talk about is this.
This is a good half of the episode, give or take.
Yeah, it's about halfway through the episode where the portal opens, because she turns things on. A couple of police officers or security guards come in and, you know, hold her at gunpoint. Tick, who's like heard, you know, that she might be in danger, arrives, gets into a bit of a fight. She actually shoots one of the officers. The portal's up behind them, and she ends up getting sucked in. And it does look like Tick kind of gets sucked in as well and gets spit back out at the end. We don't see where he goes. We don't see anything from his point of view.
I wasn't sure he got sucked in, to be honest.
Well, I wasn't sure at first, but he definitely pops back out at the end. So I was like, oh, he must have got sucked in, because he.
I thought that was maybe just the editing of the camera, kind of showing it to us coming out, us coming out of the portal world back into reality.
Maybe, but it looked like he got sucked in, and then it looked like he could pop back out again. Like, both sides of it looked that way to me. So maybe we'll find out where he went next time, or maybe we'll find out that he wasn't taken to anything as fantastical. He was more just like in a void for a few seconds and came back out. For him, it was like nothing. You know, so he didn't have like this whole adventure like Lita did. But she gets sucked in, and she's in like space, and then she's in like a really fancy looking spaceship or space station, or, you know, some sort.
She's on like a planet or a moon or something first. It's
like ultra white, sort of sleeky walls. We have, you know, this alien, you know, presumably, maybe an android. This woman who has a giant afro, but it's very kind of specifically shaped. They've kind of molded it to be a very specific shape, and she speaks kind of in riddles, just saying "I am," and Hippolyta kind of, you know, figures out how to get out. She kind of spends some time. And this is the thing. It established before that she studied astronomy, that she knows physics. She does this kind of thing. You know, when she's at the observatory, you see her using all these skills, and it makes sense. And she uses her smarts to try and figure out how to get out. But then, of course, there's just like a force field. It doesn't work anyway.
It's going pretty well. I mean, as far as escape attempts in an alien place can go.
Yeah. Well, because she wakes up naked and there's like a jumpsuit waiting for her, so she's kind of just in this, again, ultra bright, sort of sleek sci-fi future where everything's just kind of blown up a little bit in terms of the white balance and not the white balance, the f-stops, the exposure. That's the word I'm looking for. The exposure. Everything is a bit overexposed in the background, so it has this kind of glow looking to it. And then eventually this, you know, alien / robot / higher being. Again, I'll go with whatever it may be. You know, we find out, well, we get the idea that she's essentially asking her to say what she is. So she's saying "I am" because she wants Hippolyta to say "I am," whatever. You know, where do you want to go? What do you want to be? And she says she wants to dance in Paris, and all of a sudden she's transported to, and there's like star dates or something coming up in the bottom, like.
Yeah, I think the first two bits were coordinates, and then the last one was a date, because I did notice Because we spend a little bit of time in Paris here, and only the third, because it's clearly split into like 3 numbers. Only the third one seems to change at that point. So I'm assuming the first 2 are the coordinates, the space, and then and that last one's the time. Maybe it's person, space, time. Potentially.
I'm not going to pretend to decipher any of it, but they were popping up. I'm sure there is some logic. I'm sure the nerdy writers did actually figure something out for these numbers to mean something, but
I'm sure Reddit's already cracked the code.
And essentially, she goes through like essentially 3 kind of experiences, 3 worlds. Whether or not they're completely fantasy and just made up worlds for her to experience, which kind of seems to be the case in a lot of ways, or they're alternate Earths or alternate realities where she has these different things. I mean, that's open for some debate. I
lean more towards that. Because obviously that's introduced in the conversation she has in the third one. She talks about the many worlds theory.
Yeah.
But then the actual being at the end does talk about, we can put you back in your world. So it kind of, there's just enough there to nudge it in that direction for me, I think.
But to actually talk about what it is that each of these 3 phases she goes through, the first one is kind of about her having the freedom to just essentially be free, essentially, to dance, to party, to do what she wants, to feel like she's not tied down to anything. And this kind of, she has this great speech at the end of it when she's at this party and she's talking to the other women there, and talks about how angry it makes her feel to think that even in the life that she actually had, she was still kind of like imprisoned in a way because of society, because of the way she had to live, because of these things. And it gets her angry, and she says, I am, I'm really mad, blah, blah. And that takes her to a world where she gets to sort of live out her anger. So the first world's about living out her freedom, the second world's about living out her anger and
it's
actually fighting
for the freedom.
Yeah, fighting for, actually earning it to make her feel like she's earned. And she's kind of, honestly, when it first cut to her in this old school Romanesque kind of attire, I was like, wait, is she on Themyscira? Like, have we actually do Themyscira?
There was a point, because it's clearly like it's like an African tribe.
Yeah, because when it pulls back, you can see it's not an island, so I knew it wasn't. But there was a split second where I was like, wait, are we doing like Themyscira shit right now?
Yeah, but no, I did the same, because I'm not familiar enough with African history to have placed the time period of this from the start.
Yeah.
So I was just like, how far back are we? Is this supposed to be, she is Hippolyta, and she was always kind of that version of her as well? Are we kind of playing with that at this point? I was still under, maybe this is time travel.
I don't know, because I wasn't. That's just kind of where I go to. They're kind of like, maybe it is different worlds, but they're kind of being created for the purpose of like her experiences in them, because it feels like it all works. Because even the fact that like, I mean, obviously, like, maybe they're not going to go through the effort of actually doing a different language for this, but the fact that they have like the person in charge of this like little army like dropping F-bombs, it felt oddly like surreal, like how modern some of the language was. So you could just sort of chalk that up to stylistic choice rather than anything else. But part of me, it made it feel like it was kind of for her benefit, like it wasn't so she could understand it, so she could experience it, so she understood what was going on. And she's basically in a training scene, and then ultimately, once they've trained enough, they actually fight the invading male army, notably coming at them in the desert. And we get this very stylistic. I mean, the effects don't always hold up here. It's one of the most ambitious sort of effects stuff they've done in terms of, because it's this it's like a war scene with this CG backdrop, which didn't always look bad, but it was kind of obviously that for the most part.
Yeah, I think you kind of give it a pass because it's doing something so outside of its wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That, you're like, okay, this is not what you're supposed to be doing week in, week out. Like, if this was a show where this was the setting for, 90% of the time, this would be a problem. When it's a 5-8 minute sequence in one episode, you're like, okay, I'll let it slide. And
this one ends with her saying she's George's wife, and this leads to the third one, which is actually just a recreation of the first time we ever saw her. It's her lying in bed and him saying, or her saying to him, what are you looking at, kind of thing. And it becomes about her getting her frustrations out about how even her marriage with him kind of, in a way, trapped her. The exact way she phrases is that, ever since when she was younger, she wanted to like discover stars, she wanted to be an explorer, she wanted to do all these things, and she kept getting smaller. And even if she didn't realize it, even getting married and having a kid kind of made her get smaller. And he's very, he's like, oh, you tried telling me this? And she's like, I did try telling you. Okay, told you in a bunch of ways. And it does tie into her at the start of the show wanting to go out on the trips, wanting to do those guides with him and discover things with him and not just be the one at home. And this version of George, does apologize and does try to understand what she's saying to him.
I think it's important as well. You say this version of George. Yes, it's obviously he's alive, but it's, as far as I can tell,
it's still him.
It is exactly the George she knew. Just if on that day that we where we opened the show with them, that this had been the conversation, I'm sure the responses from him would have been identical in every way.
Which gives her closure with him. I mean, maybe not in how he died yet, but it definitely gives her closure with him
in terms of their relationship.
Yeah, and how he he did accept this and understood what part he maybe played in that, and so it's kind of a sweet scene. And once this sort of culminates, she ends up floating in space. Like, well, actually, she goes to a planet first. She's in like a spacesuit with him because they're exploring together. It's almost like a fantastical version of the guidebook, right? Where instead of like saying which parts of America are safe for black people, they're literally landing on a planet in a goofy 1950 style spaceship with goofy aliens, and it's basically based on the comic book that Diana was doing. She's got literally the fishbowl helmet.
Yeah.
And it's super. It's very cheerful. I had a big grin on my face during this sequence because it was like, I can't believe the show gets to do this shit. I can't believe they found a way to work those visuals into the actual show, and it looking, good. It looks really nice and pretty and colorful. And in the culmination of this, she ends up kind of floating in space, talking to the being who's now speaking a little less robotic, I noted. But she's got like, lots of very colorful kind of like, it's almost like her body just kind of goes into like a stream of light rather than actually being a corporeal form.
It's got texture to it though. It's still like almost like a fabric, like a dress almost, like it flows.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of like becoming just like almost like a nebula you'd see in the sky. Like it's starting to look like it's just part of space.
Yeah, it kind of blends by the end.
And this is kind of where I was. And the way she was talking to her, that's just what I was kind of thinking of, like those beings in Star Trek they find that have like achieved a higher being, so they appear kind of godlike, but they're actually just advanced, evolution reforms beyond us.
Which I think there's a logic to that here, because obviously what we didn't mention is she has like a chip in her arm, which is kind of allowing her to do these things that they've put in.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point here, they say, okay, you've kind of understood your purpose now. You know who you are. You don't actually need that chip anymore. We can kind of take that out of you, and you can just become one of us.
Yeah, it's a self-form of realization. And I was thinking, because she was offering this, like, hey, you can go and be wherever you want. You can join us, or we can send you back to your Earth. And I immediately went, wait, you've got a daughter. I mean, surely the right choice here, regardless of how you feel about anything, is to be there for her, to hopefully let her discover who she is easier and better than you did, because that's the whole idea, right? Is that for each generation you make it better for the next one. That's the goal, ultimately. And she does. She says, no, Dee needs me. I have to go back, and we don't actually see her arrive back, because when we cut back to the observatory, Tick, and we see him kind of arrive, is again looking kind of like he comes out of a portal as well. But Leeta's not there. He looks around. The dead cop's there. And he obviously quickly grabs stuff and runs because the police are coming. This is going to look really bad. Obviously, he doesn't want to be here when they find him. And we end in this ominous shot. The comic that Diana wrote and drew is lying next to the body, and it says, like, written by Diana Freeman on it. And it's like, oh no. Like,
yeah.
Like,
there's evidence. It's not great.
I mean, it's literally got her name. I mean, obviously, she's not the one who killed him, but I mean, you can't imagine.
Lead him right to the house, right?
Yeah, but you can't imagine they're going to be nice to her either. Even if they discount her as the actual culprit, like.
Oh, not at all. No.
So things ain't going to go smoothly.
Yeah, and I do wonder where Leeta comes back, because obviously she doesn't come back here and now with Tick, but assuming everything that those beings was real, right, and it wasn't just a thing in her head.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that's all real, do they have the power to choose when and where they send her, rather than just, okay, you came in that portal, you go out that portal? Can they send her back to home, for example?
Oh, sure, yeah. Like if she didn't appear here, I assume they put her either at her house or somewhere relevant that we don't understand yet.
Yeah.
So
somewhere safe, essentially, is kind of the point here, where she's not about to be caught.
Yeah. It's worth mentioning the other cop who didn't get shot got sucked into it first, so who knows where he went and what he gets shown, or if he just get left to suffocate in space. I don't know.
Yeah, because obviously, once we're in it, it seems like space, but from the outside, it's like flicking through various places and times, it seems. It's showing you all these...
Dare I say there's some interstellar stuff going on.
I didn't see that, yeah.
Dare I say. So, no, I'm intrigued. It wouldn't surprise me, actually, if there is like a time difference thing where she'll pop back up in the finale as if, like, no time has passed for her. As if, like, the movie will do the literal interstellar thing where time has moved differently for her. So when she comes back, it'll have been, I don't know, a couple of weeks. I don't know. But
yeah. I mean, at the pace this show's been going, a couple of months at most, right?
Yeah. So, because we have what? I mean, this was what, episode 7?
We've got 3 left, I think.
Yeah, we got 3 left. So that stuff's fascinating. But there's a lot of other stuff, of course. Is Tex going after the book because Letty has a dream about his ancestor at the house in the fire. The same dream he had.
We'll
get more or less.
As if it's it plays it as if it's her ancestor. Intriguingly, in the way that she dreams it.
Yeah, but we know it's not, so we know this is kind of like her just in the tick position, although there's some notable differences, one being that she's pregnant, which immediately we all went, okay, she's definitely pregnant in real life then. Like, this is a prophetic dream. But it told her about the book, and Tix goes off looking for it. They actually go to his father first, though, and they catch him with the boyfriend who's leaving, and they were kind of almost having a nice breakfast, but Montrose had to Montrose.
Pretty much.
Is the best I can describe it. And I actually want to kind of really compliment this section of the episode. One, because obviously the acting here was phenomenal from the reaction, but I really appreciate that because it would be very easy to try and make Tech just be this perfect character, and I think them saying no, he's going to have some of the problematic views of gay men of the time period. They're not going to sugarcoat it and say he's like magically... I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's some people in the 50s that you could find who were progressive and did think a bit more like a modern day person.
But I think the point here is not just, he's a persecuted minority, so he understands, the other persecuted minorities are in the same situation. It's not like that. It's in his mind, it's almost like there's a hierarchy.
I mean, that's a bit of a leap, but I think there's some extra elements here to it as well, because it is personal. Because the thing that he starts talking about when Letty comes out to speak to him afterwards, when he's like really struggling to hold in his emotions, is he's talking about what his father would used to say when he beat him up and when he punished him and things like that, and it's almost like it's revealing for him a lot of like his father's motivations and a lot of those things, and so it's effective. So you could argue him like shouting out the homophobic slur at him at first. Well, still clearly wrong. You can imagine a lot of it's coming from the emotion of like what this actually means for their relationship, beyond just what his opinion is of his father being gay. If his father was a loving father his whole life, like what would his reaction be here?
It might be different.
Yeah. But I like that it didn't sugarcoat it. I like that it's like, no, like we can accept that he still has some problematic views of the time period about other things that aren't the show's primary focus.
Right, and I kind of like it as well because this was brought up a couple episodes ago where it was suggested to Tick that this might be the case, and he obviously didn't have a lot of time to process it because the plot got going right after, but he obviously wasn't too comfortable with the idea then, so I think I kind of appreciate them just kind of going all in on that essentially, and not taking the we took some time, he thought about it, and it's okay now. It's like, no, this was still raw, and he is a very flawed character still. He's, it's not just he's the hero, so everything he knows everything's right. Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to, I mean, not that this is on the level of what they were talking about last episode, but it goes back to that sentence from last episode. The sometimes some of us do monstrous things, but that doesn't make us monsters. Kind of thing. And even from Montrose's perspective, like clearly, him being this closeted. I mean, obviously not to his wife because he confirms here that she knew to Tick, but this idea that his temper and frustration might largely come from him having to hide a part of who he is, and it's notable that as soon as this escalation or this conflict hits in this moment, he immediately rips off his shirt and is ready to fight. Like he's ready to start punching Tick. Like he's yelling at him. He's ready to go. He doesn't even stop to think about what he's saying or what he's doing or about how to de-escalate the situation. His instinct is to get defensive and try and assert his dominance because he feels like kind of like how Tick even implies outside, this idea that he will see the idea of being gay as being a weaker man. So he's been determined his whole life to try and prove to everyone, especially his son, that he is a strong man. So that and a lot of the beatings come from that. And he even does it here. Like this is his instinct, is to kick in. It's like, no, I'm going to prove that I am a strong, hard, tough man, and that kind of
Pretty
idea,
much.
right?
Yeah.
So no, it's just written perfectly, I think, in the anger of it and the acting from both of them. But because I mean, Williams here playing Montrose, he was fantastic in The Wire. He's been great in several things. He's in I've been doing it for Patreon. When They See Us, he's in that. He's good in that. I mean, he's not as big a role in that because it's a big ensemble cast, but he's a very good actor. It just so happens that the actor playing Tick here is also phenomenal, and because it's kind of his show, he's kind of one of the central 2 or 3 characters. He gets so much good stuff in this show to do that.
Yeah, and I think part of it is with Montrose, the actor, he's a known quantity, right? We kind of know he's good. We know what to expect.
He's the old guard, yeah. He's someone who's developed a career, yeah.
With Tick, it's still, even every episode, it just catches me off guard a little bit that, oh man, he is that good. Like in this sequence again, it's his facial reactions that he nails. I think more than anything. I mean, he's good all round, but those are what puts him above and beyond. Just the moments where he reacts to something without saying anything tends to be his best moments.
And he's definitely going to be Jonathan Majors is going to be leading movies before long.
It would be a crime if he's not.
I feel like if there's going to be more seasons of this, I hope they locked him down in a contract because it's going to be tough to get him back. If now that he's going to start getting offers, because he's in a Marvel movie, I think. Didn't he get cast in Ant-Man 3? I think that was him. He's going to play.
I'll tell you what. I don't pay attention to Marvel news, so I'll tell you word for it.
I think he's going to play Kang the Conqueror. I think that was him, if I remember right. But
okay,
I think that was the role.
I will take your word for it. But what you're going to say is within a few years he's going to be a household name.
Yes, and because of that, it's going to be tough to get him back. So I hope they locked him down into like maybe a 3-season contract or something, just to ensure they have him.
Yeah, it's funny between him and the Letty, Joni Smollett as well.
Yeah.
Obviously she had probably her bigger break, earlier in the year with Birds of Prey being the high profile thing. But again, it's like I hope you did get the contract sorted nice and early, because again, I can see her being a pretty big star in the not too distant future too.
Yeah, did she have like bigger stuff kind of lined up? Let's have a look. I'm curious because she actually doesn't right now, but I imagine that might just be because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I suspect this is just stuff not having been announced rather than not doing anything.
I suspect too. It's just that. But you know what? I can just click on him and find. Yeah, he is Ant-Man 3. He is Kang the Conqueror. Yes, I was right.
Okay.
I'm not just making things up. So no, that's really cool. And then to skip over to Letty, who's going to go with them, but they can't take the car, so they have to get the bus. Mainly because Lita's off to do some exploring, and she's asked Ruby to look after Dee. And in fact, we should mention because Ruby has a big scene at the start of the episode where she gets some. Basically, we find out that all the bodies that are being used in these like disguises are actually having to be made from the DNA of the people. So he was actually, it wasn't her brother, luckily. It was her boyfriend, was William originally. And
yeah, he was a real person with, I don't want to say feelings, because that seems like I'm implanting a little bit much there, but thoughts.
Yeah. But we get this like Frankenstein-esque lab where they've got the bodies up and like there's like fluid coming out of them and all sorts. And Ruby demands to know what's going on, and Christina's assuring her that like everything I said was true. Everything is real, and she notably leaves out. I mean, maybe she tells her after off camera, but she does notably leave out in the explanation of the cult and all that, all the racist parts of it. She talks about. She really focuses on the misogyny without ever really mentioning the other elements. Now, admittedly, it does sound like she is going to go into how it connects to Ruby at the end, because she mentions her family, and that's where the scene kind of ends. And later on, I was kind of like, it almost felt like Ruby was kind of trying to get Letty to tell her stuff. Like she's actually not quite. I wouldn't say double agent, but she's been convinced by Christina to maybe try and suss out some of these details that she's looking for. And
she's definitely, again, not one of those spying, but paying attention. You see her eavesdropping a little bit when she's on the phone. I do want to just mention, I loved the transition here, because the end of that scene, like you say, it's about your family, and that's where I believe, if I'm remembering right, we actually cut to Letty having the dream, and being in that place, and it's this interesting connotation, this connection there that just makes you start to question things.
Actually, on the dream, I had this. I thought I mentioned it earlier, but I had the thought as I was watching it. The reason why she's in Tick's place and why she's part of the family now is because she has his son in her. Like, the idea that part of the family line is in her now.
Sure.
And that's why she has this dream now. Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yeah. Lock it in.
Hey, I think Assassin's Creed did that exact same rule like a decade ago, so yeah, works for me.
Don't try to credit Assassin's Creed with things.
I'm not saying they invented the idea. I'm just saying, it's it works.
So anyway, but we have a couple of beats with her where she's feeling a little bit sick, and she says she's having a reaction, and Ruby even cracks a joke about like being pregnant, and obviously we're already sitting going, yeah, she's got nausea. She's it's happening. So. Very interested to see where that goes. Obviously, there's not much more after this, because once we get about halfway through the episode, all the plots, other than the Lita stuff and the portal, all go away.
That's all it is for the rest of the episode, until that tiny little snippet would tick at the end.
And it kind of is our 2001. I mean, we joke sort of comparing it to that, but if you think about what 2001 is, this idea of reaching the next stage of evolution, it's kind of her realizing her next stage of self-realization.
Yeah, I mean, I was not joking too much when I made that comparison. I think stylistically it kind of fits in with that as well.
When you said it, I was just thinking visuals and the fact she's in this white room, kind of like the movie when he wakes up in the bed. Like, there's some visual similarities, and that's kind of what I was. But now I'm thinking about.
But the point of it is there,
yeah, there is actually kind of a proper correlation to the ideas of it. So we have a 2001 episode. We've had Indiana Jones episode. We've had Haunted House episode. We've had Body Swap episode. We've had a Asian horror episode.
Honestly, this is the one that caught me off guard the most, though, because everything else I'm like, yeah, sure. I think the Indiana Jones one was maybe the most out there before this, in that all the rest were kind of borderline, horror still, whereas that was kind of pulpy adventure.
I actually got excited because of the title card at the start, when it came up saying Lovecraft Country, because there's always like a little drawing or something under it. I think it was like Korean text last time. There's a little just drawing of like the comic book character's head and the fishbowl helmet, and I kind of saw that and went, oh, what's this episode going to be if that's the little symbol?
But you didn't expect this.
I expected to go this far, but I got excited. I'm like, oh, we're actually going to get like some sort of weird like sci-fi pulpy adjacent thing. And they kind of mixed the visuals of pulpy sci-fi from the 50s with 2001, which is like the most unpulpy thing ever. That's like big brain science fiction at the other end of the spectrum. So it's an interesting mix of styles, I guess.
Kind of want to watch 2001 again now, though.
But no, really good. No, what I have very little bad things to say about this episode. It was definitely a weird, surreal journey.
Yeah, I think my only real problem is the lack of most of the plots feeling like there's any resolution. And I don't mean that everything needs to wrap up neatly, but everything does end so abruptly because we spend half of it doing 2001. So yeah, when we get to the end and it's just like, oh, that's it, we're not going back to the others, you're not seeing anything to follow up on any of those things. I did feel that a little bit, like, okay, I've got to wait a week now, I guess, to follow up on some of that.
Yeah, I think it was kind of bold though. It would have felt really weird to cut back to other stuff. Once we were in space doing the weird trippy stuff, it would have been weird to like cut back to Letty throwing up in the toilet or something. Like,
I agree. I think more what I would have preferred, and I think structurally this is you have to rewrite things a little bit to make the timeline fit. Is for that to happen in like the middle third of the episode rather than the second half, so we can still tie up a little, still continue some of those other plots at the end a little bit.
Sure. You'd probably still have to save Tick arriving with the comet being there for the final scene, but yeah.
Yeah. But just some of the other stuff, I think, I would have liked to see a follow-up scene with Montrose, a follow-up scene with Letty, a follow-up scene with Ruby. I don't mean, I need, huge advancements, but just something to check in, follow up on, because it didn't feel like anything ended with them. It just felt like it got interrupted by the other stuff.
Yeah. I think what caught my attention this episode as well is that Ruby might be kind of working against them just now. And again, admittedly, I assume she's being played a little bit and doesn't know all the information, but she's kind of doing her own thing. Lita is kind of doing her own thing, and they find out about it. But what was really noticing is that we have all these characters that theoretically should be working together and should be on the same side, but somehow, some way, they're all kind of finding out about things independently, and are all kind of butting heads, and they're all kind of getting in each other's way. And I think there's maybe, it wouldn't surprise me if a big part of like where this story goes is them all kind of eventually realizing they're on the same page and, coming together, and that being like a big deal.
I think especially the fact that, because Tick, the reason he's separate for a lot of the episode is, he goes off to visit family, right, on his mother's side.
Yeah, it's like the one cousin who's still alive from the Tulsa Massacre. Which,
go on.
I was going to say, like, the only reason why I know what the Tulsa Massacre is because of Watchmen. That is a very...
I think that is true for a lot of people.
Yeah, that is a very not well taught or well discussed piece of history, which is not that old and is pretty brutal and violent and it's just tragic. Because that's a horrible, horrible massacre, and the fact that I learned about it from a TV show that isn't a historical piece of documentation or documentary or whatever.
It's a bit weird.
Yeah. So.
But there was a little something in this scene that I think is important. She's showing him the family photo album. Oh,
the marking, the branding or whatever it is.
Yeah, he has the same mark, or at least a very similar one, if it wasn't the same shape exactly.
It's like a lowercase t almost.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I think it's because it doesn't it's a bit smudgy, right? And it doesn't connect. It's a very ink blotty kind of way of doing it. But yeah, I think you're kind of right as describing it that way. But I thought that was interesting to kind of have in there.
Yeah, because he thinks he can find the book. That was the thing they get from the dream, is that the idea that the full book, because Christina's looking for the missing pages. He's like, oh, I can get the rest of the book and maybe actually learn how to do some spells. So I do what I appreciate about this. I appreciate that the idea of learning to do something magical is really difficult, and it's if we're going to have him do it, it's going to be probably the end of the season where he's all this effort to discover that it exists, to find the book, to then learn something .
Yeah.
If you're going to do magic, to me, because I'm not a big magic person, especially when it's so commonplace that everyone's just, Expelliarmus, mother effer, and so on. I appreciate the idea that it's difficult, the idea that it takes a lot of time, and, one might bring up the hit television show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But I appreciate that the one character on the show who becomes a witch and does all that, it does take a long time. It starts off as just one thing here, one little thing there, and it's over time they become more powerful and learn to do more stuff and so on. Yeah. I appreciate the build of it feeling difficult, because if it feels easy, then it's why isn't everyone just doing magic?
No, I get it. I think the idea here is anyone could do magic with access to this book. For example, just most people don't know that that's a thing. It's not even a possibility for most people, right?
Yes. It's actually really simple. The one instruction is just say the spell out. The other thing you have to do is stick your finger in your bum as you say it, and then that'll make it work.
Worth a try, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. But just before I forget, the point I was getting to with Tick being off at the family, he's relatively close to where Lyta is at the end, right? Because he can get there without the car. And it's again, okay, they're on the right trail. They're both ending up in kind of the same sort of place independently. And it's just waiting for them to figure it out and work together, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
but Ruby's definitely reporting to Christina, right? You know, like the orrery and stuff that she's, you know, when she overhears the phone call.
Yeah, for that, which is worth mentioning. That's how Letty tells Tick, as she ends up seeing it all lit up in the room. So, and we should mention that Lita does go to the rubble of the mansion, which I was getting uneasy about because we've met the local sheriff for that area. I wasn't feeling comfortable with her and Dee just sauntering around on their own out there. But she sees the comic book, the burnt remains of the comic book that Dee did for George, and that lets her know she's on the right path. But just thought I'd mention that. But no, the show keeps surprising me, keeps doing different things, and I think what I like about it is that your mileage may vary as to how much you like each concept, but I don't think you can look at any of the episodes and say that it's not trying to achieve something thematically by the end of it. And I think this one is a really strong example of that, where it's about her self-discovery. It's taken Lita, who up until now was relatively minor as a character, in the sense that she had a few scenes in the first couple episodes with George, made her like her. She was upset obviously after he died, but she was missing for the last few episodes, and then
pretty much. And before that, it was just how she reacted to Tick and the others, and and their secret. It wasn't about her. It was just them keeping the secret from her was really what it was about. And
this made her a full-fledged character.
Yeah. And I think if nothing else, this show definitely commits to its ideas more than almost any other TV show.
And it's keeping in theme with the show as well, because it doesn't take that much to talk about this in relation to what Montrose is going through. This idea of not being who he really feels he's supposed to be, and it's very different, of course, because he's kind of ashamed. He doesn't want to. Lita's a little bit different in that it's more that she kind of let her life go by and didn't realize she wasn't doing and fulfilling what she wanted to be, and some of that's choices she made, some of that's the world around her, some of that's just really bad things, but. The idea that this is kind of a consistent theme of the show is the idea of not being who you're supposed to be because the world around you is either actively stopping you or convince you that you can or convince you that you shouldn't. And that really does feel like the main thing that ties everything, because even Christina, a villain, most likely, I mean, unless she takes a hell of a face turn towards the end, even her motivation is kind of along those lines.
It's that she feels rejected and unrepresented, and treated unfairly because of something beyond her control.
And last week, Gia's whole thing was that as well. So it's definitely the main driving force of the whole show. So that is episode 7 of Lovecraft Country. So let us know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. Like and Super Report on YouTube. Is the easy and cheap way to support us and to help get our content out to more people and find more of an audience. You can also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. You can otherwise catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates, but otherwise that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any Cthulhu?